Now we're talking. My name is Felix and I am your host for today's episode of What About It? Lots of heavy hardware has entered Starbase in preparation for a complete infrastructure change. China will make its own Starship, Starlink achieves an incredible milestone, and Blue Origin is expanding like crazy. Stay tuned and let's dive right in. Starship updates. When SpaceX informed NASA that they'll be ready to launch another Starship in about 8 weeks, no one believed them. And while it still looks like an overly optimistic work schedule, the amount of progress that happened in less than a week is unbelievable. And it looks like a new mega construction is about to start at Boca Chica, and some like the Starship project so much they've decided to create their own super heavy rocket, but more on that later. Work at Starbase never stops. Last week Elon Musk told us SpaceX plans to turn the launch site back to its old glory, and it appears that the teams decided to implement this plan right away. The orbital launch mount still looks to be far from being operational. Recently the Raptor quick disconnect arms were removed. They were used to spin up the outer ring of 20 Raptor boost engines during the startup process, as the engines themselves don't have the capability to do so. You might think that not having the ability to relight engines would be a problem, but during the flight itself, the outer ring of Raptors is supposed to be fired up only once anyway. In return, it saves a lot of mass, as Super Heavy doesn't have to carry all the necessary hardware that would be useless seconds after liftoff. Either the quick disconnect arms got damaged during the launch, or SpaceX has changed their design so that they have to be replaced. It appears that parts of the hold-down clamps have also been removed from the orbital launch table, but the underlying cause of their removal remains a mystery. It almost looks like SpaceX is cannibalizing the launch table for parts. Is SpaceX going to replace the entire launch table? Looking down, the excavators are working hard to get rid of all the debris. Some of them even seem to be breaking the already existing concrete. All of this effort is being put in to make the steel plate installation as quick as possible. On May 6th, Lab Padre's cameras captured a surge of hardware going near the Orbital Tank Farm, or OTF. At least 3 HPM 180 Plus foundation drilling rigs, along with some pipes, entered the launch site over the course of 6 hours. It looks like some big construction is about to happen at Starbase. Without a proper flyover from Mauricio, we are unable to tell what exactly is being planned, but there are a few options. The big pipes shown earlier are most likely casings, which will be dug into the ground and later stuffed with rebar and filled with concrete to create a base for some heavy structures. Obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is the Orbital Launch Integration Tower number 2. Unfortunately, as much as I would love to see another launch tower at Starbase yesterday, it's really unlikely that this is going to happen anytime soon. First and foremost, SpaceX failed to provide the necessary documentation to the Army Corps of Engineers, who withdrew their permit that would allow for a Starbase expansion, which included plans for the second tower. It also doesn't make sense from a logical standpoint. As Elon said, right now all focus is on getting the next prototype back onto the orbital launch mount. Building a second tower and subsequently a second orbital tank farm would take a lot of time and effort, which could instead be spent on improving the first launch tower. Now, don't lose your hope yet. There are 3 very interesting and more likely scenarios. As much of the hardware appears to be concentrated at the OTF itself, engineers may be getting ready to expand the ground support equipment system. After all, Elon Musk said that some, if not all, of the currently used vertical GSE tanks will be taken down. Part of them will be replaced by the hot dog tanks already used to store liquid methane. In the case of liquid oxygen, it could require a significant number of them to reach the capacity of the already used GSE tank solution. Maybe, to simplify everything, SpaceX wants to use the same LOX tank that was built at Florida's LC-39A, or much larger hot dog or bullet tanks as they are actually called could be used. Old-time viewers of What About It probably remember the long saga of figuring out whether workers were constructing a launch tower or a water tower. Eventually it turned out to be the OLED, but perhaps this time, after all those years, the water tank can finally make its comeback. There, I said it. We are not 100% convinced that the GSE tanks can provide sufficient pressure needed to shoot up water from the soon-to-be installed water-cooled steel plate. That's why it's possible that new foundations will be drilled next to the water-related hardware just behind the tower to support a large water tank which might be needed for the deluge system. Keep in mind this is speculation, none of this is confirmed, and we are not affiliated with any water tower companies either. Last but not least, the drilling rigs can be used to add additional support to the orbital launch mount itself. Before the OLM's legs were made, many of such pilings were dug into the launch mount's base. This clearly wasn't enough, as the sand underneath compressed anyway. So maybe before the steel plate will be installed, more supports could be added to prevent this from happening again in the future. Of course, there is a chance that SpaceX is working on something entirely different, and time will have to tell. The paper trail of additional piling under the OLM, a water tower, and some as large as it gets LOX tanks is forming steadily though. This video is brought to you by Blinkist, the app that can help you understand the most important things from over 5,500 non-fiction books and podcasts, most of the time in just 15 minutes. So this is good. The first thing I looked up after joining Blinkist was the reading list from Elon Musk himself. Between Steve Jobs' Human Compatible and 0 to 1, I chose the latter to get some ideas on how to improve Y Media. With its 10 key ideas taken out of the book by Blinkist, I was able to check off almost all of them completely and see the few points I am still able to improve. 26 minutes for a whole book! Even better is the Blinkist Connect feature. I was able to share my plan with a second account for no additional cost, finding inspiration together and never running out of topics to discuss. Get your insights into 0 to 1, notes on startups, or how to build the future and become what you thrive to be. Just go to blinkist.com/whataboutit right now and get 20% off Blinkist Premium and enjoy 2 memberships for the price of 1. Start your 7-day free trial by clicking the link in the description. More repair work has been spotted near the orbital tank farm itself. The liquid oxygen tank that suffered a leak after Starship's liftoff was patched up with a sheet of steel, which suggests that the debris didn't puncture the internal layer. Patching steel tanks, that's a new one. We saw a few deliveries of small black tanks that were delivered in front of the horizontal part of the ground support equipment, or GSE. They were later used as replacements for some of the tanks that got hit by concrete during the launch. The pace at which everything is being replaced or fixed is remarkable. Hard to imagine that just 2 weeks ago the launch complex looked like a post-nuclear wasteland. Some attention was also directed to the suborbital side of things. Just 2 years ago, on May 5th, the prototype steel can SN-15 took to the skies during the first high-altitude test flight that actually managed to land the ship in one piece. Well, there was SN-10, but it didn't last very long. 2 years later, launch pads A and B are still going strong, and it looks like they may get some more use again. A few days ago, the thrust ram, a device designed to simulate Raptor's thrust, was removed from the suborbital pad A. Some of its parts were transported to the messy site, but we'll come back to this in a second. Right now, the important thing is that SpaceX might be working on reactivating both pads to allow them to static fire ship prototypes while the cryo testing can be conducted at Messies. Last week we reported on a large fire at this second test site close to the rest of Starbase. It wasn't as bad as it looked, as just days later a series of pressure tests were conducted on 2 test tanks right next to the location of the fire. The first one to get a taste of that cryogenic nitrogen was a test vessel with the serial number S26.1. Unlike the last test of Nose Cone 31, this one's objective wasn't to destroy the article, so after filling it up with nitrogen it was safely detanked, at least for now. Next to S26.1 you can see Ship 25 standing on another cryo station. It should be pretty obvious by now that this prototype is destined to fly exactly nowhere. It's simply too old of a design, and there is a high chance that Ship 25 isn't even compatible with Booster 9, the next Super Heavy supposed to be used during the next launch attempt. It still is a great test tank that allows for validation that the Massey's cryogenic stations were designed properly, so that in the future other flight-worthy vehicles can also be tested there. But why would SpaceX want to move the cryo testing away from the launch complex in the first place? There are a few good reasons, let me explain. Firstly, testing at Massey's requires that only the Massey's road has to be closed by the local police. This means that they can cryo-proof prototypes without shutting down operations at Starbase itself. With more and more vehicles, closing the whole facility every few days becomes a huge pain. Secondly, it's also more convenient in case something goes wrong during testing. Massey's is a pretty remote piece of land with no public interest, unlike Boca Chica Beach. If something blows up, there's virtually no one to complain about it, and there is no possibility of damaging a piece of hardware crucial to the main test campaign. Testing at Massey's could also streamline the process of validating vehicles. Currently, it looks something like this. A prototype is placed onto a test stand to go through a cryoproof test. Next, it has to be lifted off to allow workers to install a thrust ram to simulate Raptor thrust. The vehicle is then lifted back and tested again, assuming all goes well. It is then taken off another time to allow for engine installation and to remove the previously installed thrust simulator. Finally, after all of this, a final wet dress rehearsal and a static fire can be conducted. It might not seem like that much work, but with that many ships, streamlining the process could turn out to be a huge time saver. SpaceX could instead have one cryo station at Massey's without any thrust simulation capabilities, then have another one with thrust rams installed, and finally, if the ship is ready for a static fire, a dedicated stand waits ready at the launch complex. What do you think? Is Massey's the future of Starship testing, or perhaps it will exclusively be used for the experimental test tanks? As always, let me know in the comments. I can't wait to read what you think. And while you're at it, make that like button burn, subscribe, or even become an active supporter by hitting the join button or by following the Patreon link in the description, and get behind the scenes access, including our Discord server. Thank you so much for your support. On we go. Now let's take a closer look at a Chinese rocket idea that looks suspiciously familiar. For years now, China has been trying to figure out how to put a human on the moon before 2030. Many ideas, including working together with other countries, were proposed, but ultimately they all included one thing: a super heavy lift rocket capable of sending a lunar lander into an orbit around the moon. Long March 9, or Changzheng 9, was originally supposed to be a 3-stage, fully expendable vehicle capable of injecting almost 50 tons into a trans-lunar trajectory, so towards the moon. Back in 2016, the design aimed for a 10-meter, almost 33-foot diameter core with 4 additional liquid fuel boosters, helping to achieve the desired payload capacity. A beast of a rocket! Over the years, the LM9's design evolved, increasing the diameter to 10.6 meters or almost 35 feet, eliminating the boosters altogether, and instead opting to use 16 liquid oxygen and kerosene-fueled core engines. In 2021, the first rumors surfaced suggesting that the first stage would be reusable with a Falcon 9 style approach. So using grid fins and propulsive landing to get back to Earth. In 2022, there was a brief period where the whole thing changed again. This time supposedly switching to 11 meters or 36-foot tanks, but this change was so quickly reversed that there is no need to elaborate on it further. Finally, in 2023, it appears that the Chinese National Space Agency got a design they want to proceed with, and it looks incredibly familiar to say the least. An over 100-meter tall 2-stage rocket with 30 engines on its booster and a second stage with flaps. Both are fully reusable and fueled with a mixture of liquid methane and liquid oxygen. Now, where have I seen something like this before? I can't quite put a finger on it. It appears that the Chinese government likes to make rockets whose design has already been validated by someone else. In fact, some renderers of the Long March 9 seem to use a Starship model just painted over with new textures. It will take a while before the Chinese Starship can prove its reusability, as the first test flight is planned to take place around the late 2030s or early 2040s. Before that, a more realistic approach will be taken where the vehicle will consist of 3 stages, with the upper one using 4 Hydrolox YF79 engines which were already tested in 2021. Looking at Changzheng 9 history, I wouldn't be surprised if a year from now the design would again entirely change. Nonetheless, it will be fascinating to see whether China will successfully use SpaceX's design approach and if they will finally be able to develop a reusable rocket. Either way, it's another testament to SpaceX's design being the best out there. If everyone copies you, you're doing something right. Now I've got some exciting news for all Starlink fans. On May 4th, another Falcon launched from Cape Canaveral's Slick 40. This time, booster B1069 carried 56 first-gen Starlinks to then successfully land on the A Shortfall of Gravitas remote drone ship. According to data provided by respected astronomer and astrophysicist Jonathan McDowell, this launch brought the total number of Starlinks in orbit to over 4,000. 4,023 to be exact. It's impressive to see how quickly the internet service provided by SpaceX expands. To think that the first operational launch of a Starlink happened less than 4 years ago, and now it has become a weekly, barely worth mentioning event. Crazy times. Recently published data also shows that people do, in fact, want to use Starlink. Over 1.5 million customers around the world is definitely a nice revenue stream, helping to further expand the network and fund Starbase. It's starting to look like the first FCC deadline of 6,000 satellites in orbit by the end of 2024 is looking achievable. Of course, if the pace at which SpaceX launches Starlinks won't slow down. Blue Origin is starting to pick up its pace regarding its heavy lift rocket New Glenn. Unfortunately, they are not too keen to share any information with the public, but that didn't stop us from figuring out things on our own. Many have speculated that one day a full-blown, ready-to-fly New Glenn will just roll out from the hangar and successfully reach orbit on its first launch attempt. Currently, Jeff Bezos' company is taking the regular approach of building a proper old-school launch complex with a complete flame trench, but it's not to say that they didn't include any new tech at LC-36. It's basically an improved version of LC-39A and B. During NSF's latest flyover, a weird structure was spotted at the pad. We don't have any official confirmation as to what its purpose is, but one explanation could be that it's a sort of adapter that turns the launch pad into a second stage static fire stand. On April 26th, New Glenn's second stage was spotted in Blue Origin's testing facility. Even though we've seen some of its pathfinders before, this one appears to be the real deal. Presently, it's pretty bare, but we expect it to go through a test campaign similar to Starship, where the tank will be pressure tested inside the facility. If all goes well, New Glenn's second stage will most likely be moved to another building in order to get its thermal insulation. Lastly, a part of another piece of steel can be seen at Blue Origin's first stage cleaning facility. All of this can point to the conclusion that SpaceX's nemesis is somewhat close to having a complete prototype of a rocket. Will Blue Origin launch its heavy rocket before the end of 2024? It remains to be seen. Now, a bit of a sad one. A 20% budget cut was proposed for one of the most ambitious and exciting missions covered by NASA's 2024 annual budget. Dragonfly aims to be a much more advanced version of what Mars's Ingenuity is right now. A vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, or basically a drone, is supposed to explore the dark secrets of Titan, the largest moon of Saturn and the only other known place in our solar system to have open oceans and lakes. Not water, but methane can be found in Titan's rivers, lakes and oceans. Unlike Ingenuity, Dragonfly is supposed to be equipped with a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, or RTG. This allows for way longer and more reliable flights, as there are no solar panels that can get dusty over time. An RTG can also deliver way more power. With a maximum speed of 36 km per hour or 22 miles per hour and the ability to climb to an altitude of up to 4 kilometers or roughly 13,000 feet, this rotorcraft will be able to cover a distance of over 175 kilometers or 108 miles over the course of its almost 3-year mission duration. That's more than the distance covered by all Mars rovers combined. Even though NASA Administrator Bill Nelson wants us to believe otherwise, if the budget cut is approved, the scheduled 2027 launch could slip by years. In the best case scenario, the mission remains unchanged, but it's likely that there will be some cuts taken somewhere. Either in the launch date or the proposed mission profile, time will tell, fingers crossed for Dragonfly. After a week of stormy weather, Rocket Lab finally launched the Electron, carrying 2 out of 4 of NASA's TROPICS satellites. Designed to help improve the prediction models of tropical cyclones, hurricanes included. It was Rocket Lab's 4th successful liftoff for 2023, but only the 2nd from New Zealand's Launch Complex 1. The other 2 were launched from Launch Complex 2, located at Wallops Island in the US. The moment those satellites entered their desired orbit, the clock started ticking. Now, Peter Beck's company has only 60 days to deploy a second pair of TROPICS satellites, or the whole constellation can be rendered useless. No pressure. The second mission, coming to a storm near you, has a launch window that opens on May 16th, so that's less than a week to get another Electron to the launch pad. That's it for today. Remember to like and subscribe, check out our merch store to beef up your space nerd wardrobe, epic merch and absolutely worth a visit. And if you want to get even smarter about space and rockets, watch this video next to continue the journey. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again on the next episode. Now, farm or OMG. First and foremost, SpaceX failed to provide. There you go.